Hi, I'm Jay Gruenke, founder of the Balanced Runner System. I've been helping runners from beginner to Olympian improve their form and performance since 2003. And I'm here today with another stuck at home running form tip from my living room to yours, helping you use this time to become a better runner. So this week, actually, I think probably the whole week, I'm going to be talking about how to run faster, the role that your running form plays in helping you to run faster, and maybe to a degree that you hadn't considered. Because running faster always means running differently from how you're running slowly. And in fact, once I'm done talking about how to run faster, I'm going to do another series of videos on how to run more slowly, because it can be challenging also to feel good running at a slower speed for a recovery run, or to run MAF if you do MAF training. So that'll be coming up as well. But let's first look at the thing that more often runners want, which is what to do with your form to help you run faster instead of just trying to do the same things that you were doing at a slower speed, but harder, right? Because that gets exhausting really quickly, and it doesn't really get you where you want to be speed-wise. And, so it's just like train harder and work harder are very, very expensive ways to run faster. It's part of the equation, but let's look at your form. So today, I'm going to talk about how your forward lean helps you run faster. So I am not the only running form expert who talks about leaning forward, but I have a different perspective on it than the other folks who do. And I also feel that it's a fairly uncontroversial, like it just is part of running. And as long as you understand that when we're talking about a forward lean, we're not talking about a slouch, then, I think most people would agree, really. And in fact, if you watch children break into a run, in the middle of a soccer game or whatever, they all fall forward. There's this moment of forward sway, and then they run. When you watch athletes playing sports that involve running, you see them all lean forward to run. Generally speaking, athletes who play sports that include running, but also their team sports, and they're watching a ball or a ball of one kind or another. A frisbee could be a frisbee. Have better form than pure runners because the coordination demand of that sport is higher. They have to run while doing other stuff instead of just running. And their activities that they do with their body are different and are more varied. And so that leads to better coordination on the whole. So you could always look to them if you want to understand some more about how running works. So what is it about leaning forward that helps you run faster? Leaning forward, there's not good indication that after your first step, leaning forward adds any energy to your running, or it's only when you change the angle at which you're leaning forward that you speed yourself up or slow yourself down. And when you're standing still, and we talked about this in an earlier video, leaning forward is part of how you initiate running. It's how you create that first step. But then you usually maintain your forward lean. And then if you want to run faster, you might then lean a little more deeply. Fortunately, Leroy is deeply asleep, and that didn't disturb her. And if you want to slow down, it's like a horse. You pull back on the ring, you come back, and that slows you down. So there's an obvious impact of your lean, but so why does that work? Each change in the angle of your torso to gravity, really, because the ground, it might be downhill or uphill. Or you might be, well, no, we don't think about treadmills when we're talking about running form, because then you get all mixed up. You have to think about the ground being still and the body moving. So it does potentially add a little momentum, but more so, yes, I know I'm leaning right over you, but more so when you lean forward. So if I'm leaning forward this much, then my legs are going to be here, because this leg is going to be ready to catch me for my next step, right? So my swing leg is going to be about here in order to, right, catch me, insofar as I can demo this on a sofa. But if I'm leaning more deeply, then my swing leg is going to be here, and my stride length is just increased. So, and even though there's a balance always between stride rate, or how frequently your feet hit the ground, and stride length, how long each stride is, and generally speaking, the longer stride length means the lower stride rate, like, so the longer your strides, the fewer of them you usually take. And even though that balance has to be right, and it's possible to have your stride length be so long that you're not touching the ground often enough, and you can't create enough thrust, you're losing momentum, you're even overstriding to make a long stride length, and so this front leg is hitting at an angle where it stops you, and so you lose momentum. So it's possible to have too long a stride and have that not help your speed but make it worse. But in the case of a forward lean, you're not likely to be overstriding and creating braking force. And if you've got a good core action, you're also not likely to have too low of a stride rate. So the changes that I see in my clients, usually like when serious runners come to me who've like been tracking all of this stuff and have personal performance goals, runners and triathletes, and often have been aiming for, well, this could turn into a huge digression and maybe should be another video, but just briefly, they've been aiming for a particular stride rate, 180, if that's you, you know what I'm talking about. Usually over the course of our work together, actually their stride rate will come down a little bit, but their stride length will increase and their speed improves without significantly increasing their heart rate. So a lot of runners, I think, are getting this balance wrong, where they're working too hard on getting a high stride rate and can't feel in their bodies how to organize themselves to get a stride length that speeds them up instead of slowing them down. Because wherever you're at in terms of those two factors, faster running for you is probably going to require at some point to some degree a longer stride. And part of your stride length is just how much time do you spend in the air, but part of it is, what can your legs do, right? And a forward lean creates a longer stride length. So you can see that, less of a lean, shorter stride length, more of a lean, longer. So another thing that a forward lean does is it changes how you push off the ground. So there's pushing off the ground and there's releasing from the ground, and both things are important. The pushing that you do in running is somewhere between here and here, but it's not this very last little bit with your toes pushing off. Like by that time, your weight should really be pretty much off your foot already. Your toes are not very strong compared to your thigh and your calf and your obliques and your, to some extent your glutes, all the ways that you create a push off. This side is pushing off, you see. The leg straightens, the hip pushes down, my whole side gets longer. That's how you push off in running. And when you are too upright, you're trying to push off behind you, so your hip joint is your thigh bone is quite far into hip joint hyperextension, right, in your hip joint, and you end up using your glutes and pushing your pelvis forward, and then you get into the head bobbing thing that we talked about in an earlier video. And you have to do extra work in your trunk muscles to keep moving the rest of your body forward, because all you're really pushing forward is your pelvis. That's not great for running. That's not very efficient movement. But if you are in a forward lean, you've lined yourself up like this, then you're pushing your whole body forward, and especially right in this zone, right? And you're not doing it so far in hyperextension. You're really just extending the hip joint and going a little bit into hip joint hyperextension. So you don't need a whole lot of this. This is perfectly sufficient. and you can push downward in a way that pushes you up and forward. So that works much better. And you'll be amazed at the difference that makes in your speed. And then it also puts you in a better position when you do get to your toes. Well, okay, it puts you in a better position to even get to your toes. And amazingly, lots of runners never use their toes. I've been astounded over the years. You know, sooner or later, usually sooner, I ask every client, do you feel your toes come into some kind of contact or receive some kind of pressure or even just touch sensation as you are about to leave the ground? And the answer is 90% of the time is no. The runners are actually taking off from the ball of the foot and they never even use their toes. And that's because with their whole body, they're chopping their stride short. And it's also because of things that they're doing with their ankles, which we're going to talk about later this week. But if you get a forward lean, then you're able to extend your leg, and your body is very far past your foot. Let me see, I'm going to adjust here so that you can see my foot a little bit better. So if I'm not leaning very much, then I'm pushing off here, and my pelvis is, about that far past my foot. If I do lean forward, or even more, so my general center of gravity, it's better to talk about anatomy, but every once in a while, like here, it's just like where your weight is overall matters. So my weight is about here, and I'm trying to leave this foot. But if I move my weight forward, then it's effortless. My toes are coming into contact with the ground, but they're not being asked to do a big push. There's no pressure on them. And my whole body is cooperating in helping me leave that foot. And that makes a huge difference too. And it also makes a big difference in terms of injury profile, in my experience. So especially with calf problems or people who have chronically tight calves, which there's always a flurry of things. Somehow I've been getting a lot of emails about that lately. So that's another benefit of leaning forward as far as your speed goes. And the thing that you need to know, so there's my first 4 videos in the Stuck at Home series are all about your forward lean. And you should really look at those if you want to be running faster and you feel like you're not leaning forward as well as you could be, and this is something for you to work on. Please go back and look at those videos because it'll help you understand how to lean and how to troubleshoot your lean. But since we're talking about speed, and when people talk about running form and speed and even strength and speed, they tend to really focus on the glutes and how to push with the glutes. But the thing that you really need, again, it's like the more upright, the more likely you are to push with the glutes and do a lot of work there that doesn't actually move your body forward very effectively. And glutes don't even really, that's not their main function in running, as I've also talked about earlier in this series. But what you really need, the range of motion that you really need for a better stride length, if you're using a forward lean, isn't hip extension for all the reasons that I've explained. It's not the ability of your thigh to do this in your hip joint. It's hip flexion in the forward leg. If you can't easily enough bring your leg forward so that it's going to catch you for the amount that you're leaning forward, and by the way, this would be quite a strong lean, and no one ever leans more than this. So just bear that in mind. We're not always talking about a super deep lean here, but this is going to be the limiting factor. If your nervous system feels that you actually can't get your leg in position to catch yourself, it will not let you lean that forward because you'll face plant. Okay? So that may be something that you need to really look at. If you're working on speed and you feel a bigger stride, length is a missing piece for you. And if you've gotten that far in working all of this out already, you are probably working on hip extension. And what you probably should be working on is hip flexion, hip joint flexion, okay? And then it's worth also just mentioning something else that happens when you start running more that way is that you do, with the longer stride length, you are going to hit the ground a little bit harder. Not in the sense of a jolt or anything that would be uncomfortable, and you are going to have more compression. There's going to be more ground reaction force altogether, and so that's great because that helps you load your tissues so that you can spring backwards. That helps you use the spring capacity of your body better for running. But it does increase the demand in mid-stance because there's more pushing down that you have to resist. And so, if, again, look back to my first week worth of stuck at home running form tips for more, week, I think it was, for more about how to get this mid-stance alignment right so that doesn't kill your quads, but your glutes are doing the work that they should do in that position, but you will feel a small increase in effort because you're handling that force. But it will, for the speed that you get, it won't be as big of an increase in effort as if you were just running the same way that you were running slower, but harder, right? Does that make sense? So, yeah, I can't think of another way to say that. Yeah, your effort will increase a little bit, but not as much as if you tried to do other things, less productive things, to run faster. So that's an overview of how your forward lean and how getting a better forward lean helps you run faster. And tomorrow I'm going to stay on this topic, so be sure to tune in. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to put a lesson in the description below. I have to think which one, but I'll come up with a good one. A free lesson that you can do. Probably, yeah, I think I've got something good for you. So be sure to check it out in the description below after I finish here. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do that so you don't miss a video. Please hit like if you found this video valuable so other runners who need this information YouTube will share it with them. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.